Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Soul Food Coffee House, and welcome to Soul Food Poetry Night. I'm Michael Dillon Welch. We've been doing this every month here for 11, almost 12 years, and we're pleased to be having Soul Food here again, Soul Food Poetry Night here again tonight. Thank you for making the choice to be here. There are many other choices in life, but we're glad you're here. We have 4 readers tonight, and I'll introduce them as they read. There are books for sale right down here if you want to check them out. We also have a we also have a sign up for our open mic, and if you'd like to read for our open mic, please sign up down here. You can do that at the break later, if not now. And our question of the month this month is, what is your favorite time of day? And I think we've already got some fun answers, so please add to that if you'd like to join our open mic reading. What we'll do is we have 4 featured readers. We'll feature them first, then take a break where you're encouraged to buy things to eat and so on from Soul Food, and then we'll have our open mic after that. To begin with, I'd like to read a poem called Perfection and Ars Poetica. The archer fish knows refraction as it spits from its tropical mire to shoot down crickets for dinner. It adjusts for the kink in light, the light that shifts direction from water to air, from the imposition of its world to the world above of heaven. Is this a marvel of creation, a piece of the grand design, or an accident of evolution? Or is this miracle simply gained from the need to feed, trial and error, that perfects the poem? And that's one of my own. Thank you. So if you've been involved with poetry in the Seattle area over the last 20-some years, it shouldn't take you that long to hear about a group called Poets West, which was started by J. Glenn Evans. And do you know the year that was started? Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when. It's been a while, yes. The Poets West currently is an organization focusing on poets and poetry in the entire Pacific Northwest, and they have an ample website. And one of the features I particularly like about the site, is basically a listing of prominent poets in this area with short biographical sketches and so on. So if you want to learn about any poet that has some history in this area, you can find out on their site. And it also lists numerous venues for reading poetry, so it's a superb resource for readings in this area. And Poets West also sponsors a number of readings in the area and has a is it weekly or monthly radio show? Weekly radio show. And that's on KSER 90.7 FM out of Everett. So a lot of activity run by Poets West. And any poet in this area is grateful for their existence. And we're glad to feature poets affiliated with Poets West in our reading tonight. Our first reader is Teal Aisha Ansari, who is a Sufi warrior poet. Her work has been featured by Fault Lines Poetry, Windfall, Kboo Radio, and Prairie Home Companion. Her books include Knocking from Inside and High Voltage Lines. I also see that you have a book of haiku, which has got my attention since I do a lot of haiku. She works as a data analyst for the Portland Public School District and is president of the Oregon Poetry Association. So thank you for making the trek all the way here. Her website, if I can read this, I forgot my glasses tonight. knockingfrominside.blogspot.com. That's her website. So knockingfrominside.blogspot.com if you want to learn more about her and her work. Please welcome Teal and Aisha Ansari, if I've said that right. I hope so.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Rain, for contacting me and giving me the invitation. It's great to be here. So, as Michael has mentioned, I live in Portland, in Northeast Portland to be specific, and you may be aware that Portland was submerged under hundreds of feet of water during the Missoula flood at the end of the last ice age, along with the rest of the Willamette Valley. That's Willamette rain. And so the first poem I'm going to read sort of refers to that, and it takes place in my backyard in Northeast Portland, and it's called Backwash. My shovel bites into the ground and stops, crunch, on small round stones. 200 feet above the river, my yard's choked with water-smoothed pebbles, tiny glacial erratics dumped by backwash. 500 trillion tons of melted ice came down like God's hammer thrown for gold, scoured out the gorge from side to side, down into deep bedrock, backed up into the Willamette. 400 feet of water over Portland, sucked down in the wake of the greater flood, stripping out the riverbed all the way to Eugene. Instant erosion pushed the falls upriver past future bridges, ghostly steel frameworks suspended in the swirling flood. We've built a bridge now for bikes, trains, and pedestrians only. We're having serious conversations about driving less, reducing carbon footprints citywide, statewide, talking about a carbon tax. On Mount Hood, the glaciers get smaller every summer. This continent couldn't field another flood like the Missoula. I toss a handful of stones into the shrubbery. 500 trillion tons of water. My hand seems tiny and the glacier's vast, but one pebble can move a mountainside. I was raised in East Africa. I lived there for about 10 years, from the age of 7 to the age of 17. And lately, I find myself writing poems about that. And they're not really poems about living in Tanzania so much as poems about remembering living in Tanzania, because that was longer ago than I really care to remember. So I'm going to read a couple of those. And the first one is called The title of this poem is also the first line of the poem. It's Charlie Brown's kite. Used to be the only shape I knew for a kite. A classic diamond, ribbon tail, a dream of flight doomed to be devoured by a starving tree. Now, any week at Cannon Beach, the sky is filled with dragons, box kites, bats, mantas, castle towers, mini parasails, strange, ungainly forms you wouldn't believe could fly. All colors of the rainbow ride the wind. Combat kites slice each other's strings among banners, birds, and monster silhouettes. My memory is 4 white stars on a ground of black, low in the southern sky. The Southern Cross, unlike its swan-winged northern counterpart, has no center point. Looks just like Charlie Brown's kite, flown from God's hand above a world full of star-eating trees. This next poem is titled Bagamoyo. Bagamoyo is the name of a city on the coast of East Africa that was a major departure point for the slave trade in the Indian Ocean. And the word Bagamoyo means, here I lay down my heart. Here is the stone I dreamed full of voices, echoing the clink of chains in a ship's hold, stinking of sweat that dried without seeing daylight. Here is the stone that listened, where no ear of flesh would hear the captive's cry, the driven slave, stone that captured the crack of the foreman's whip. Here is the stone I dreamed dancing to no drum. Here is the great heavy stone that sat in the center of the slave mart, round rock crowned with rusty rings and broken links. Here is the auctioneer's altar, the seat of barter, the seal of sale, the coast where ships waited, holds hungry for human cargo. Here is the stone where they laid down their hearts. Their voices fill my dreams. I'm going to read a couple of poems that I wrote to the same prompt. I write a lot of poems to prompts. Not all poets like to do that. Some do. I'm one who does. I think prompts are a lot of fun, and sometimes they give rise to really good poems. And this particular prompt is one that was kind of popular in poetry circles in Portland for a while. And the idea is the phrase, "You bring out the blank in me." And you fill the blank with someone you think no one could possibly ever use to describe you. And then this is sort of the departure point for the poem. And when I first heard about this, I went home and asked my husband, "Would you ever describe me as a moon maiden?" And he just kind of stared at me. It's like, okay, I think I'm on the right track with this. You bring out the moon maiden in me, the swirling, diaphanous, ice-glittering gauziness in me, the vapor-locked vacuity, the astronaut's air gauge reading 0 in me, the ethereality, purity, asynchronous inconstancy in me, the shining sphere of healing quartz, fortune teller's globe of glass, gibbous green cheese Gibson girl in me. Meet me at the dew point, and I'll jump into your gravitational well like Ophelia in the river. I'll shine with reflected light and a suicide's glamour. Captive satellite, willing slave in Newton's chains, I won't even wobble you on your axis. I'll wane uncomplaining and wax asymptotic. If any stars or starlets should dare to look on you, I'll stand in front of them. That's called occultation. I'll be a cult of one. You bring out the silver sickle cat's claw midnight magic in me, the star-sequined indigo rayon high priestess robe in me, the rhinestone tiara champagne blonde pageant princess in me, the true blue spoon June new age new moon moon maiden in me. Be my strong-armed Apollo, my hot rocket Armstrong, walk all over me. And here's a more recent take on the same prompt. You bring out the lynch mob in me. You bring out the midnight knock, the knotted noose in me, the sheet with holes, the burning cross, the blown up black church in me. You bring out things I never knew in me, the jackboots, submachine guns, barbed wire in me. You bring out the knife and the gasoline-filled tire in me, the chokehold, gun to the back of the head, jail cell suicide with mysterious camera malfunction in me. With you I burn mosques, bomb synagogues, desecrate burial grounds. With you I put all the bathroom signs back the way they should be, and if anyone suffers, it's their fault for being different. And you say it's God will because you know I don't dare believe in a God who is love. You bring out the spite in me and fatten it on a diet of alternative facts. You bring out the fear in me and promise a wall to make me strong. You bring out the hatred in me and promise a war to keep me safe. You plow me and sow me with dragon's teeth to bring out an army. But be careful, Mr. President. The legions I breed cannot be dismissed. No, no, master, and will bite the hands that feed. If you followed much of the narrative around the Grenfell Tower fire in London, you may have noticed that the majority of the people who lived there were not only poor, it was cheap housing, but were mostly immigrants, many from African countries, many from predominantly Muslim countries. And it sort of adds a dimension to this tragedy that these people who came to the UK, came to Europe in search of a better life, were met with this neglect and ultimately fatal neglect. So this poem is dedicated to the people who lost their lives in that disaster, and it's titled Grenfell. This pillar of fire by night, this tower of smoke by day, is a signpost to a land of promise not kept, a guide to no exodus, no escape from bondage, no refuge for you. Throw your baby down. All his life he will dream of falling through siren screaming dark, through flame and shattered glass, the same nightmares that haunt your homeland. Did you see it, the miracle, the safe landing in a stranger's arms? Was it the last gift of your sight before the lids burned away from your eyes? I know too much. Photos, videos, recordings of the last desperate phone calls. I've learned too little. Still, bodies fall like ash from burning towers. I've said all the right things. In the shadow of this smoke, the light of this fire, escape is not possible. Silence is not acceptable. Speech is not enough. So probably most of you know that back in May in Portland, 2 men were killed and another seriously injured on Max on our light rail. They had intervened to protect 2 young women from being bullied by someone who was shouting racist and religious epithets, and this man pulled out a knife and attacked them. And this was the Portland community was very shaken by this. We all think that, this is not the kind of thing that would ever happen here, but it did. And then, as you all probably know, more recently in Charlottesville, a peaceful protester was run over by a car when a white supremacist drove a car into the crowd. So this poem is for Charlottesville and Portland, and it's titled Sister Cities. So this is war. No barbed wire marks the front. Hot metal plows into the dumbstruck crowd, and then the screaming. There's nowhere to run. Your enemy is here, close as a shroud, close as your shivered breath that mists the blade before your eyes. A civil war, a neighborhood affair. My fellow citizens, betrayed we stand where once our finest dreams had stood. So this is war. How it begins and where? Charlottesville and Portland, sisters bled in common cause. 3,000 miles of distance, opposite coasts, same side of resistance. Martyrs linked by weaves of scarlet thread, a banner raised against the torch's glare. I'm going to read a couple more. This poem is also by way of an Ars Poetica, and it's sort of a prose poem, and it's called Paper Birches. There are white birches outside my building. On a clear afternoon, the west sides of the slender trunks blaze with sunlight. The east sides glow with soft light reflected from the building windows. There is no darkness around these trees. Moss will never grow on them. I hold up a sheet of paper and it kindles bright on both sides. I hold up a poem and one side is lit by reflection from the faces of listeners. The other side is brilliant with divine radiance. In this transaction, I illuminate nothing. My fingerprint on the paper is only a shadow. The poem is incandescent. The poem is a white birch. And finally, because poems are kind of like bottles with messages or maybe without messages, this poem is actually titled Bottle Without a Message. The bottle was empty. There was no folded paper or leaf with letters cleverly pricked into it, stuffed inside. There was no label, no drink me tag, no emblem cast into the colorless glass. But the wind across the neck whispered like a breeze in a grove of palms that covers an entire continent. Remember. And using the thick base of the bottle as a lens, I set fire to the wreckage of my lifeboat, and the blaze was visible for miles. And in the morning, the same knot letters spelled out the names of God on a lateen sail standing in to shore. Thank you.
Thank you, Teal. I'm sure we have a number of friends in common, poet friends in common in Oregon. Next, we're privileged to have Art Gomez read for us. He was born and raised and crazed in Omaha, Nebraska, and moved to Seattle in 1981. Art's poems have been published by Spindrift, Poets Against War, Bard Ball, Epiphany, Poetic Matrix, Seattle Muse, Poetry in Motion, Minotaur Press, and on Poets West Radio. Art is currently the host of the Poets West program at Seattle's Green Lake Library. Please welcome Art Gomez.
Well, hi there. Thank you to SoulFood for hosting us, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to start with a couple of political poems. Any given moment. When I think about Donald Trump, I think of scat. Which definition applies depends on any given moment. The futurity ain't what it used to be. Patrons crowded the parimutuel window, placed their wagers, paraded to the grandstand, decked out in bellicose bunting, held collective breath at post time. They bet their future on a long shot because a chance to win or lose bigly has its own adrenaline rush. Many months ago, the bell sounded, the gates opened, the thundering hooves and mouth frothing began. He ran a steeplechase as a mutter. She ran a harness race, champing her bit. Jockeys whipped each other. Neither showed much class. Headed around the final curve to crash through ceiling glass. Running down the home stretch of a race that sanctioned crass. Neck and neck to the wire. Finally over, but alas, won not by a horse's nose, but a horse's ass. With my apologies to horses everywhere. Homeless poem. This poem requires certain words of uncertainty, yet it is the very nature of being without certainty that hinders words certainly required of it. Being homeless, this poem will likely be ignored or discarded or hounded and rounded up. It might snidely be told to stop sponging words from upstanding poems, the few words it possesses, impounded or trashed. In the eyes of some critics, this poem is clearly disreputable, a hair's breadth from criminal. Yet, this poem did not set out to be unworthy. As with most poems, this poem was born to high hopes. But, as sometimes happens, a fallible poet nurtured it, and society bestowed little value. While this homeless poem may not be bum-rushed into a metaphorical slammer, it might easily find itself in analogical purgatory, a lexical encampment set aside for unworthy ditties, until such time as its sullied syntaxes of uncertainty have been ascertained and most certainly cleansed. Home, street, home. They find themselves tramping this drear-filled night through asphalt alleys bathed in neon light, in a concrete desert of plastic blight. Stray souls lit afire and taking flight on singed broken wings, two lost parasites. A stage door slammed shut, play set to begin. Auditions now closed, no cot at the inn. They must keep moving, there's no time to rest. They migrate as birds in search of a nest. The sky overhead is threatening rain. Dry haven corners are searched for in vain. Negative thoughts are a constant refrain and must be ignored for them to maintain some semblance of sanity in their brains, resembling humanity inhumane. Inked clouds obscuring the moon and their minds, they run like a jailbreak toward hopeful signs. Flashed lightning, roared thunder, wind whipping loam. They must shelter in place for tonight's home, knowing, come morning, they'll once again roam throughout city jungles and catacombs. I'm hovering, watching, stealth as a drone. I keep my distance, I leave them alone. I shrink in myself as though they were me. Clenching my eyes, I pretend not to see. Would I want outsiders to leave me be? Unsure what to do, I turn and head home. Unsure what to do, I flee, and they're gone. Box for no one. A misfit spirit of death dance decay smells the beauty in darkness. His dog hairs carry historical lice, singing beneath the sobbing. Bound to a spell confounding the critics, he shimmers iridescent. Faith as steady as the tide is in him, even if unrecognized. His home once housed a refrigerator, now recycled as a shack. Cardboard invention and genius of man, thrown away society. What is obsolete might become retro if life passes enough nights. Rain, steady as full moon light, falls on him after he's already gone. Those shreds of melted board clog the sewer. Broken glasses shine eerily. One shoe without laces gives evidence, all clues from the left behind. Street sweepers and night watchers tidy up, ready for the next tenant. Her new home now delivered off the truck, once housed our broken machine. Now I'm going to play God for a couple. Divine intervention. I don't care if you worship many gods or one God or no God, as long as you don't worship me. Gods tend to disappoint and be cursed or accused of forsaking. If you must, then believe this is not my act, but yours. I have enough trouble without the added burden of creating your worldview or being your excuse. Goddess luck to you and still springtide. Now let me be. Unbeliever. You claim I exist, claim faith in me, claim I am omnipotent, claim other faiths are untrue and you don't recognize me. Claim conscientious objectors to faith offend me. Claim I am wrathful, vengeful, awful to behold when angered. Claim my exclusive blessing. You will claim and claim as you will, it matters not to me. Hear this, the enemy of faith is not doubt, it is your hubris of certainty. I proclaim you have no faith in me as you postulate and pontificate, you prove faithlessness. You prove you have missed my message. Know this, I am all, everywhere, within everyone, everything. I have no wrath, no vengeance. I cannot be offended nor angered. I need no one condemned in my name. Believe this, your blessings arise from each other. Answered prayers come to pass through your own compassion. Bliss in paradise exists as the bounty of my earth. You confuse providing stewardship with using dominance. In each of your days, here is where you shall be awe-filled. Be thankful. I do not have a special place for transgressors. If I did, have faith. Your reservation would be secure. How much time? All right. I'm going to borrow shamelessly from baseball for the next couple. It ain't over. The old folks are out back weeding memories, filling their faces with smoke, discovering coffee as if they were young again. Their hungers come from disappointment, the inevitable stir of the curtain call, Life enters the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, 2 strikes. The lady prepares her song behind 6 dugout feet. Joys come from test and triumph. Life's slow curve breaks. A swing of the bat gets just enough. Soaring beyond the warning track, coming home. Cleats will be hung in the locker, never again to run the grass, but not today. One more tip of the cap before the final road trip. They never got cheated. Wait till next year. She delivers her pitch, a curve with lots of movement. He takes what she gives and strokes one up the middle, but his scoring opportunity is wasted when he's caught stealing. She's got a great pickoff. Next time up, she did not want to face him, so gave an intentional walk. He advanced on a hit and run, kept going since it was in the gap, missed the stop sign, got thrown out. He argued all the way to the showers. During the nightcap, he digs in. She comes in high and tight and brushes him back, then leaves him flailing at air as she goes down and away. They both think, what a great game. And now some love poems. Jazz critic sax. An enormous horn section poised to erupt, powerful cascades of notes fell flat. A soloist scattered a few bars, but in the end, their groove got lost. It was such a weak performance, they booed themselves off the stage. Stranger breasts. At the time, your words captivated me. Your sing-song tone and perfect pitch were beautifully, terribly wild in the way they emptied my mind, while glowing delight warmed my blood. Your lips formed liquid tongue fountains as a lava flow of molten language pooled the living hot magic. At the time, your words astonished me. The depth of your pure longing breath blurred our line between friend and lover, a line long existed, or was I simply naive? Until you breathed your flames and I saw the way you looked at me with the corners of your mouth. At the time, your words fascinated me. You were speaking peculiar riddles, and I was speechless under the power of your moment. A glimmer of awakening to your private allure summoned me to secrets sub rosa. While your perspiration sparkled on freckles instantly electrified above your unbuttoning, I traced your silk-fine hairs and exposed your thighs. A slight blush of anticipation shone upon your skin, and the sun blinded me until morning. How delicious you were, yet I trembled of fragility. My spine did not have the backbone of your eyelashes. I had flesh and fire to match your own, but you were now a stranger beside me, and at that time, I quietly cried. Okay. Womb of communion. After confession, night sweats are born through interconnected love, unbridled longing bathed in the lust of two failed and frail. The chorus of our love's duet sings flesh and finger hymns, strums sweet body frets, dueling percussive beats drive the bottom end. As we become lost in gospel crescendo, intensities slowly increase until cymbals crash. My refrain, your chorus, slowly fade in catechisms of silence. Tonight's confirmation needs no forgiveness, extracts no penance. Through our sacramental atonement, conceived in numinous union, our vernal baptism delivers us. And one last one. No good reason. She tells me, again, how cool I'd look with a gold earring. Why don't you pierce your ear, she says, again. I tell her, again, I don't want to put a hole in my ear or wear a ring in it. She glances over to her friend and gives her, see how he is? Look. The friend turns towards me. You don't want one because you don't want one is not a reason, Really? Says who? Since it's my ear, it seems not wanting is reason enough. Besides, coolness does not need to ring in my ears. Thank you.
Thank you. How long have you been running the readings at Green Lake? 3 years. And do you do any recordings there? Not anymore.
Yeah, the radio programs are all from past
Yeah. Yeah. I know they were recorded in the past there, and that was always a neat part of that reading.
People are disappointed now
Yeah.
because they live in Olympia now and there's no way to do the equipment.
Yes.
And come March, rain is going to take over the hosting.
Ah, okay. So if you hadn't heard that, Rain is going to take over running the. Apparently, he is, yes, taking over the Green Lake Library reading series that Art has been running. Next. Next up, we have Kevin O'Connor. He feels that poetry is more important than biography. He publishes the best, or at least horrible, of each day's poems on his blog, called Ordinary Average Thoughts on WordPress.com. Once he accumulates enough poems he deems worthy, he publishes a book. His latest is This Is Not the Book That Will Save Your Life. Maybe we're about to hear some poems that will not save our lives, but we will enjoy hearing them. Please welcome Kevin J. O'Connor.
Well, thanks for coming out. I will be reading from that book and also some 8-word poems from a book which will be out next month. I will start with something from the previous book. This one is called Everything Happening Now Could Have Been Avoided. In the real-life version of The Matrix, the one that got rejected, a man named Jesus took a blue pill. He lived a long, happy life in a green-tinted world where the only thing he had to save was 15% on auto insurance. After the escalator broke, a fantasy. The would-be candidate tripped and tumbled down the stairs to his death. Let's see. Checkbook. It's the one book I hate to read. There's never anything in it. Earthman ego. Earthman plans the best intentions, reaches too far. Earthman plans his satisfaction, forgets where we are. Earthman plans his own demise. And let's see. Okay. This is an example of a blitz poem. It's kind of hard to describe, but basically it's 50 lines and there's plenty of repetition built in. This is called Said and Done, and this is for Toshio Nakanishi, who was a founding member of a Japanese band from the late 70s called Plastics, and he went on to form the first significant label in Japanese hip-hop in the late 90s. 61 with no asterisk, 61 and done. Done with the flesh, done from one moment to the next. Next come the memories, next we wonder what to do. Do what we can to ease our minds, do what we must to carry on. On the day it happened, we suspected nothing. On the day after we learned the news, news felt trivial. News didn't care about feelings, care about facts. Facts fall away in the face of life and death. Facts are inconvenient. Inconvenient is the interruption. Inconvenient fails to convey the real meaning. meaning we have trouble expressing what we feel, meaning our meaning may be misunderstood. Misunderstood is about what we'd expect. Misunderstood is followed us around the pictures from the scene, around everything we've done to break free of the old order, done to be who we need to be. Be the artists the world needs. Be the ones to make change somebody's point of view, change hearts and minds and get people to dance and shout and scream and make love all night long, dance to get people standing up to scream and shout, standing up for rights we won't live without the voices they may not hear, without a push they may not move to push the old guard aside, move to clear the way for the new wave your hands in the air, wave them like you just don't care to make the world better, care because it means something we do here may survive us, something we do has to last. Last time I didn't know it would be the last thing you said as you were headed out for good, said to reassure us there would be more good. And this is an ekphrastic poem. It's a poem based on a painting. In this case, the painting is by a Chinese artist, and the title of the painting is called The World of the Internet, and the poem is called Awakening to a Chrome Existence. My cat makes noises at the end of the hallway. At her feet is a creepy monkey bear thing. Or maybe it's a sandal. I won't know until I flip the light switch. My cat was surely nowhere near this particular scene, but there's the sandal, cut out picture perfect from the catalog, afloat in this twisted vista. The world has been brought closer together. Seaside and mountainside collapse on a plain. Palm trees anchor mountain vias, jets fly overhead, and there's that damn sandal. The fog consuming the mountain peaks has yet to swallow them whole. A sailboat skims across the water, oblivious. Skies are blue, clouds are fluffy, jets fly safely overhead. Above the mountains, the sky grows dark. Stars sparkle like glitter amongst flecks of gold. From somewhere comes a light. I forgot to close my browser before going to bed again. I should remove those sandals from the shopping cart at least. I can make up my mind in the morning. 2 untitled poems. 1. Moments stretch out at the bottom until I notice that's no longer air I'm breathing. Stillness cracks the atmosphere. I've been carrying it so long it feels like part of me, except for the pit in my stomach. 2. She looked at me, all salt and venom just dropped from the wound. The ground looked at me and shrugged. Well, I didn't ask for this. The tent card on the table had no name, and I'm always losing my favorite pen. I'm gonna skip that one. Perspective. The worst thing I can think of to call him would still be a gross insult to the object of comparison. Six-word poem. In the ashes, an unlit match. And now on to the 8-word poems. Number 659, Poetry or Scrabble. How to find those uncommon words without cheating. Number 544, How to Make Art. Put a frame around it. Call it art. 545, How to Make Art. Become pregnant. Give birth. Name the baby Art. September 1987. At the stoplight, kissing in the car. 64, drama. That it was summer didn't make it easier. 86, Memories of You. Too many to forget, not enough to reminisce. 121, My Parents. Well, I'm one mistake they won't make again. 239, Intractable. Rain falls at last. The air doesn't clear. 337, My Catalog of Obsessions. Archiving the past is always complicated business. 101, Condensed Kurt Russell Baseball Story. I almost saw Kurt Russell play baseball once. His minor league team was playing a doubleheader against the Rainiers at Six Stadium, but he wasn't playing until the second game. And I think it was maybe 5 innings through the first game that I was tired and asked my dad to take me home. So, 357, Impossible Conquest. I wanted to take you away from me. 364, Japan. Every train I remember has the same smell. 635. A thought occurs to me every time I see that photograph. Hipster hairstyles will eventually become cause for regret. 580, Tuesday morning garbage pickup. Dumpster lid bent in half. Angry truck driver. 514, postcards properly composed reveal nothing or too much. 518, airports haven't been the same without the Krishnas. Poetry fail, or excuse me, 485, poetry fail. The words of this poem left without warning. And I'm going to finish with a couple of new ones. Story time. The story of a man who suffered an early setback, then went on to fail at every subsequent stage of development. The story of a man who never met a challenge he couldn't back away from or failed badly at from lack of perseverance. The story of a man who came face to face with love, time after time, giving love reason after reason to walk away. The story of a man who spent most of his life existing rather than living because living was too hard. The story of a man who made it to what they sometimes call a certain age by dint of sheer luck and stubbornness. The story of a man who somehow hasn't given up, who keeps on going because he may yet have a chance to make something of himself. The story isn't over yet. And since we finally had some within the last week, something profound about rain. Opening line about the first appearance of rain in several weeks. Reference to memory of a moment that occurred on a rainy afternoon. Connection of the past to the present, expression of regret. Parenthetical aside about the sound of the falling rain. Concluding line, a layered metaphor saying something profound about rain. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Batting cleanup for us tonight is Rain Roberts, who says, I'm a puppeteer. I dangle figures on stage to share insights and poke fun. Robert Frost and Charles Bukowski taught me this. What mystifies me is that many of my puppets are actually published as poems. Find him at Poetic Matrix Press and Rain Roberts Poetry on WordPress.com. Please welcome Rain Roberts.
Thank you, Michael, for having us here tonight, and thank you, TL and Kevin and Art for coming and representing Poets West. I'm going to give you an example of many things I do, because I have been told I have many voices. And I thought that was a distraction at one time, but that's just the way I work. Get a grip. Easy it is to lift a 10-pound boulder on a mountain than to sit calmly down and put a collar on an unruly mind. American viewpoint. Left, right, left, center, our political stammer. But we talk on and past one another, real discourse too hard in the Trump nation. Wolves in sheep suits write trendy slogans. We breathe deep, ignore the jerk at work. We do our best to couple, dismiss the nightmare for the dream of a big house, a car. We are the greatest nation on earth. Believe me, the Donald says, fondling the stars and bars. The kids grow, we go to church, life is good, the insurance is cut, the earth heats up. God loves us as we push his creatures to extinction. But the market's up, a housing bubble grows, only liberals say we're not best, the greatest. Midweek, something disturbs the slumber party. A murder, a threat, a missile, a killer tweet, a red herring tossed by the controlling elite, a wildfire, hurricane, earthquake, a flood, the clamor for unity. Prayer begins once more. But for Whimper, it's gone by Friday. Monday, as if we forgot the week before, somnambulism. I want to echo the poem about Charlottesville, because, of course, it was a really terrible thing that happened. But I want to approach it from a different sort of angle, and basically maybe, I suppose, well, I won't tell you about it, I'll just read it. The Promise. Be gentle to Americans, Aryan dudes. Lose those Nazi boots before you stomp our hearts again. Your feet must be bare, man. Dance us into wine, handle with care, or leave the leather on. Go on, goose step us into vinegar. But don't expect we'll see the Donald Trump equivalency for self-defense and bigotry. You never had the higher ground. Be nice whenever you're in town. Ignore the law, the people are. We promise you a heart attack, a cozy cell with Willie Brown, who's big and strong and very black. That's a sort of a comical mask I wear for the anger I feel about that, but a new compound noun. I swear I'd heard it before, so I thought I'd coined a noun, page rage. But when I Googled it, it came up quickly. Then I was upset, you see. Just when you think you found something special, you realize you're just slow, or worse, too old to know better. I see my little darling now walking the unconscious woods of the collective unknown. That's fine, okay. I guess having it leap, so to speak, in the road and stand like a doe in my headlights is something after all. Cute little scared compound noun shaking in the cold car light. I like it, even if it's not my pet. It bounds back to where it came, into the foggy wilds of the online urban dictionary. I don't know where my poems come from, except for sources within and outside of me, but some of them really kind of surprise me, and I'm talking about voices, and I'm not schizophrenic or anything, but these voices sort of come to me. And this is called Letter Affirming the Delusion of Self in the voice of W.C. Fields. I'm having trouble with my voice tonight. Yes, sirree, I am what I am, full of rum and seaweed, an old salt sailor, portmanteau in hand, full of fish bait and barbasol, with breath to gag a maggot, I tell you, copper wire to keep my head together, else it would split open like an alien egg. You'd like that, wouldn't you? But hell, I can take it. I'm the ribbon on a birthday balloon, chrome on a Harley Davidson, the alligator leather on a gigolo shoe. I'm the Pope's odd luck, a real postmodern Frankenstein, schooled by the best of them. So keep the kids away if you got any sense, or I'll turn them into pickpockets. Not that the little grubbers aren't robbing you deaf, dumb, and blind already, nasty little suckers. Where's my cigar? I set it down here somewhere. Oh, there it is, right where I left it, between the legs of my lovely assistants. Thank you, my dear. You don't look so well smoking in that part of your anatomy. Now leave me be. I have ballads to write and noses to snip. Goodbye, or until we meet again. Take that as a foreshadowing from a shadow without a body. Where's my body? I set it down here somewhere. Don't ask me where that came from. I do like W. Fields, but I sent this to the New York Times recently. I'm not sure whether they'll publish it, but it may get into Nicholas Kristof's column. The New Colossus. Hardcore, in a very new niche. No more the lady of refugees. She lights a way for the nouveau riche, wailing and singing as never before. My torch is no longer for the poor. Give me your powerful chairman of boards, your bankers, brokers, hungry warlords, your lawyers quick to make a deal, judgmental preachers of fiery zeal, the loud-mouthed fat cat tycoon, your guns for hire. Give me your goons, your huddled masses of real estate stars, American idols in fancy cars. Give me the plotter, schemer, corporate raider, liar, cheater, tax evader, downtrodden tyrant, Iranian Shah, racist, bigot, and all their in-laws, the soulless bishop with pedophile pig, all who aim to make it big on Wall Street. Look not on their virtue or their sin. They will all undoubtedly fit right in. I love the Statue of Liberty, and I love the poem by the poet. I think her name's Lazarus, but that's my take on what I see when I look at the statue now. Wishful thinking. What is the sound of one big semi-truck hitting a huge bump in the Republican road? Trump, Trump. Is that how he acts? I saw a kid in the super today who looked very much like your God. He palmed a Snicker bar. It went straight up his sleeve as he walked out. Was that your God? Is that how he acts? He's a most beautiful boy, evil green eyes, twinkling divinity from Broadway to Wall Street and back. A most delightful urchin. I followed to the subway. He went down to get a ride. There he was, standing on the platform, looking fly, a hip-hop cap screwed on sideways. I went over to high-five him on the slick jaw, but 3 archangels enclosed him in a diamond force field of wings, and I couldn't say jack. He slipped on the train, flipped me a peace sign, and vanished. Was that your God? Is that how he acts? He was sure a brainy brat, but cool. He was way too cool for his age. Nocturne. I like to throw things that are traditional in my readings. September night, first fall rain, fresh linen and a blanket lain in the last hours of summer, spilling out the eaves gutter from the top of my home. October takes a long breath as ice and cold take all under. Soon in wind will colors blow as trees the lifeless leaves go. Red and green and gold with birds will fly, reminding men that men must die. No matter their color or birth, autumn's most like life or death, brief before it comes to rest in snow. In the word love, in any moment, all things are new, but in spring, all point to something in the word and the saying of it. True as motion, dawn on an asphalt road, light on the face of the river. I held the wonder in for weeks, doubted love because we are new. I questioned love, arriving at the same truth. In each instant, all is new, not young, for all is older than the oldest star. In the trees along the water, April began opening azalea and magnolia, and I began to know, not in the thinking or the wishing, but in the saying of the word, an alchemy, clear as the effect of time on all things, the reason herons wade in, turtles claw rocks. Why, like a perfect fool, I wear this idiot grin, astounded by daylight on blacktop, confounded by my own joy. I tell you, there's something in the word and the saying of it that comprehends why a star is, makes me more alive than a man about to die, something even rivers know and rocks rejoice in. I had a friend in San Diego, she's still there, in fact, and I asked her how she felt one day after one of the mass shootings we had in the past. So this is to one when I asked how she was doing after the day after the last mass shooting. She said, "Just shoot me too." Will you smile real pretty when I pull the trigger? Will you let a squadron of dragonflies carry you by your nipples and hair into a green, forgetful sky by your toes, your nose, the white fuzz on your ears? You will forget the red and blue years, sailing a typhoon of moonlight, money, and mercy. Mercy for queers, money for roses, so many you can give every hobo drunk in the world one, and 10 for me, your God-forsaken rebel. If I whirl a twister of wishes and dreams to right the wrongs we have brought upon the children, all the animals and insects gone to extinction, if I gather the lint from your toes, socks, bra, underwear into a sudden mighty wind and knock the leaders, kings and tycoons off their murderous feet for good, to say what they promise and what we get, my dear, are something very different. Will you smile? Will you smile? Will you smile real pretty? I also want to recall the Pulse Massacre, which had a profound effect on me being gay, and everybody in the nation, of course. Doesn't matter your persuasion or orientation. The night after the Pulse massacre, if I could sing how night feels to me, it would be a sleepless, lovely gem of a song, lonely, empty of longing, waiting to be filled. A Chinese vase waiting for a spring bouquet. A blessed emptiness, the dark unknown sprawled before and after me, lover of all things, earth, moon, the cold stars that no longer give light, yet their light falls here in the dead of night on me. Sylvia's line keeps echoing in my head. The world hurts me like it hurts God. And I usually read a poem that is related to trauma. I am living with PTSD, so I always include something. And I have a feeling that a lot of my poems are driven by that condition. Getting through. After black coffee and Vicodin, that evil opiate, oh, honorable cannabis, a pinch of you will do to enter a brave new world of Soma chilled Merlot. Just a glass or two and a tab of Xanax, better living through chemistry. Then to the lobelia-laden terrace, zinnias and cosmos, the traditional tomato vine where fairies hide and seek with Maya. The sweet hour of Om begins the Om evening. The sweet hour of awe begins the Om evening. The only blue is sky, an inverted tulip, a spasm of summer, sunflowers following the light, the sun, a big yellow dahlia, cosmic taxi. I breathe bliss, as if heaven were an evening only, as if hippies had it right all along, as if dark chocolate could cure the sorry world. I breathe in and out, and later, dreamless sleep. And if I die, no soul to take. If I die of one Las Vegas cocktail on a flower power balcony, remembering Haight-Ashbury. When I was a youngster, I lived in Haight-Ashbury for almost a year. I was a runaway from home. I was only 16, and man, I have no regrets. But they caught me in the end. Radioactive Eden. And this is, I would call this poem a poem from the prophetic tradition. The waters they foul will clear, the chemicals they dump will wash away. Gravity will pull the junk down from the sky, the acid rain will sweeten again. There may not be men or women to love her, the mother will remain. I saw the waves of the sea and was sea foam, the sweep of the pine and was green, saw sunrise and was sunfire. I stood on the edge, saw the end, and this is not it. Managers, bosses, generals under God, will have you see the end is near. Gaia is a stuck pig to roast. Make us believe the Creator gave them the power. Their God of love, their Prince of Peace, their God of hope, hope in buckets of blood, hateful, wrathful Father will crush the living earth to win a bid for dominance? Think again. In 1,000 years, Chernobyl will be paradise. And this is just to close, because I like to remind myself to stay present. Burdens. Two monks returning to a monastery in the evening. It had rained. Puddles of water had collected on the road. At one place, a beautiful woman was unable to cross the road because of the puddles. The elder monk lifted and carried her across, leaving her on the other side, then went his way. Later that evening, the younger monk approached. "Sir, we cannot touch women." The elder said, "Yes, brother." "Then why did you carry that woman on the road today?" The elder smiled. "I left her on the road. Why are you still carrying her?" Thank you.
Thank you, Rain. And thank you for this selection of the other poets reading tonight, each of you with distinctive voices. I'm glad all four of you could read for us tonight. We'll now take a short break. If you'd like to sign up for our open mic, the sign-up sheet is right down here. Please buy something to eat or drink, and we'll start up again in a few minutes. Thank you.
So, you know, it's very, very proper. One of the reasons I like to have a little something to drink like this is I'm missing the salad. You are? Yeah, you got a stone in it, you know, kind of like you get the stone. And I started getting, you know, this like a water balloon filling up. I didn't know what it was. And I went to the doctor, and so they gave me some antibiotics, but it wouldn't clear. So they had to, you can see the scars, and they had to cut my throat out, take it out before it burst. Because of it. So I often have a bit of antibiotics. Something like this, try. It really helps.
All right, we've had a bit of a break. Let's get going again with our open mic. We have 3 stellar readers tonight, and our question of the month is, what is your favorite time of day? And our first reader is Robinson Bolcom, who we haven't seen here for a while. Glad you're back. His favorite time of day is 11:43 a.m., which makes me wonder about 11:42 and 11:44, which must be almost as good. Please welcome Robinson Bolcom.
Three poems. Not a ghost. No, there is not a ghost in this house. I was told by a voice with nobody to speak it. The door that had closed, I supposed it had creakily opened, inviting me in by a wind. It was an unhindered gust that had ushered, was air that'll blow when there's nobody there. I was hoping a ghost would be here. I had read it, in fact, as the Chamber of Commerce had practically promised it here in this tract. Then the Chamber of Commerce can certainly haunt, if it care to be scary, can ghoulishly do as it want. Said a ghost that would almost appear, but it maintained it ain't even here. So if you're not a ghost, you're supposed to be quiet. Insistence in your non-existence within's inconsistent, and try as I might, I don't buy it. Then quiet I'll be, so you no longer hear the unseen, so the sound you don't hear around here, that'll mean to the thought or the psyche, this ghost, it'll seem to be most likely not, so you may look about a few houses away. But then I chose to obey the advice of a voice with a source I could neither detect or identify, either a specter, of course, in denial, or else an event of my mind. And just what would I find a few houses away but a bodiless voice? I should say it was oddly the same as the one coming out of the house I had come from, that maybe it came alongside on the road that I rode for the ride. But at least it at last was a ghost. It no longer denied it'd haunt, and undaunted abide as I hear it. Why here have you chosen as ghost you'd appear, though you try to obscure with a lie, and denied you'd abide there and hide where we were? I assure you, I am not a snob or a jerk, but I haunt as my job, and though stopping to talk, I was not on the clock, and that's not where I work. Not a ghost. To write a poem. How to compose any poetry? No. To be taught how to phrase the emotion, impression, or thought? In arrangement engagingly terse, to express it in verse? I should not. I have not any reason to learn a composition perfected in lines, although metrical, piercingly stark, and if missing their mark of theatrical, easily turning a phrase or a few in unusual ways. A traditional form to encumber, delimit a brain by the length or the number of line, to contain, by assigning as may reign supreme any scheme to the rhyme? I should not learn to master a form of the past, or to leave it behind when I believe, I've explored it enough to rebuff any claim that I'm quitting, forfend when I'm game to transcend it. A writing of poetry out of my head, I would rather not learn, but instead, how to hear. When I'm anywhere near where a poem is read, and to feel an ideal phrasing astound of a power amazing, to sense in the writer of soul, of maturity, skill, both conveyed in the way and the will and the silence around and between every word, and such word as precede it or follow. In chortlingly glorious choice, a stentorian voice of immortal Apollo. To thrive upon poetry, breathing it into the sinew, alive, and to dive in, begin to discern, I would learn and continue until by the poems I've known, I am known. My desire, the poem shall know me by heart. That if I should acquire an art, it will be that the poetry inside arise. What arose would be spoken, though I had not a poem composed. And one more short one. Turtle Tale. A guy told me a sea turtle can save a drowning man. I asked him, what on earth would make you think a turtle can? He told me it had saved one once, as surely as a boat'll. I said, your so-called evidence is purely anecdotal. There weren't any witnesses and no corroboration? He answered, no, this was alone, in little-known location. My friend, your story makes me wince. It's wholly uncompelling. Well, then, I'm sorry. I'm convinced you've sold me with your yelling. And so he took his turtle tale, I'd said's unverified, into the sea, where he'd concede that he'd already died. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robinson. Now we have Laura Hirsch, whose favorite time of day is 6 p.m. or 10 a.m. Laura.
Oh, thanks. Good evening. This is not an original poem, but it's a story that I think was adapted by Clarissa Pinkola Estes in her book, The Women Who Run with the Wolves, and it's a story called Skeleton Woman. She'd done something of which her father disapproved, although no one any longer remembered what it was. But her father had dragged her to the cliffs and thrown her off and into the sea. There the fish ate her flesh away and plucked out her eyes. As she lay under the sea, her skeleton turned over and over in the currents. One day a fisherman came fishing. Well, in truth, many came to this bay once, but the fisherman had drifted far from his home place and did not know that the local fishermen stayed away, saying the inlet was haunted. The fisherman's hook drifted down through the water and caught all of the places in the bones of Skeleton Woman's rib cage. The fisherman thought, "Oh, now I've really got a big one. Now I really have a big one." In his mind, he was thinking of how many people this great fish would feed, how long it would last, how long he might be free from the chore of hunting. And as he struggled with the great weight at the end of his hook, the sea was stirred to a thrashing froth, and his kayak bucked and shook, for she who was beneath struggled to disentangle herself. And the more she struggled, the more she tangled in the line. No matter what she did, she was inexorably dragged upward, tugged up by the bones of her own ribs. The hunter had turned to scoop up his net, so he did not see her bald head rise above the waves. He did not see the little coral creatures glinting in the orbs of her skull. He did not see the crustaceans on her old ivory teeth. And when he turned back with his net, his entire body, such as it was, had come to the surface and was hanging from the tip of his kayak by her long front teeth. "Ah!" cried the man, and his heart fell into his knees. His eyes hid in terror on the back of his head, and his ears blazed bright red. "Ah!" he screamed and knocked her off the prow with his oar and began paddling like a demon toward the shoreline. And not realizing she was tangled in his line, he was frightened all the more, for she appeared to stand upon her toes while chasing him all the way to shore. No matter which way he zigged his kayak, she stayed right behind, and her breath rolled over the water in clouds of steam, and her arms flailed out as though to catch him into the depths, snatch him down into the depths. "Ah!" he wailed as he ran aground. In one leap, he was out of his kayak, clutching his fishing stick and running, and the coral white corpse of Skeleton Woman still snagged in the fishing line, bumpity-bumped right behind him. Over the rocks he ran, and she followed. Over the frozen tundra he ran, and she kept right up. Over the meat laid out to dry he ran, cracking it into pieces as his mucklucks bore down. Throughout it all, she kept right up. In fact, she grabbed some of the frozen fish as she was dragged behind. This she began to eat, for she had not gorged in a long, long time. And finally the man reached his snow house and dove right into the tunnel, and on hands and knees scrabbled his way into the interior. Panting and sobbing, he lay there in the dark, his heart a drum, a mighty drum. Safe at last, oh, safe at last, yes, thank God. Raven, yes, thank Raven, yes, and all bountiful Sedna, safe at last. Imagine when he lit his whale oil lamp. There, it, lay in a tumble upon the snow floor. One heel over her shoulder, one knee inside her rib cage, one foot over her elbow. He could not say later what it was. Perhaps the firelight softened her features, or the fact that he was a lonely man, but a feeling of some kindness came into his breathing, and slowly he reached out his grimy hands and, using words softly like a mother to child, began to untangle her from the fishing line. "Oh, na, na, na." And first he untangled the toes, and then the ankles. "Oh, na, na, na." On and on he worked into the night until dressing her in furs to keep her warm. Skeleton Woman's bones were all in order, as a human's should be. And he felt into his leather cuffs for his flint and used some of his hair to light a little more fire. He gazed at her from time to time as he oiled his precious wood of his fishing stick and rewound the gut line. And she in her furs uttered not a word. She did not dare, lest the hunter take her out and throw her down to the rocks and break her bones to pieces utterly. The man became drowsy, slid under his sleeping skins, and soon was dreaming. And sometimes as humans sleep, a tear escapes from the dreamer's eye. We never know what sort of dream causes this, but we know it's either a dream of sadness or longing. And this is what happened to the man. Skeleton Woman saw the tear glisten in the firelight, and she became suddenly so thirsty. She tinkled and clanked and crawled over to the sleeping man and put her mouth to the tear. The single tear was like a river, and she drank and drank and drank until her many years-long thirst was slaked. While lying beside him, she reached inside the sleeping man and took out his heart, the mighty drum, and she sat up and banged on both sides of it. Bum, 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 bum. And she drummed. As she drummed, she began to sing out, flesh, 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 flesh. And the more she sang, the more her body filled out with flesh. She sang for hair and good eyes and nice fat hands. She sang the divide between her legs and breasts long enough to wrap for warmth and all the things a woman needs. And when she was all done, she also sang the sleeping man's clothes off and crept into bed with him, skin against skin. She returned the great drum, his heart to his body, and that is how they awakened, wrapped up around one another, tangled from the night in another way now, a good and lasting way. The people who cannot remember how she came to her first ill fortune say she and the fisherman went away and were consistently well fed by the creatures she had known in her life under water. The people say that it is true, and that's all that I know. This is a story called Skeleton Woman. It's written by or adapted by Clarissa Pinkola Estes and The Women Who Run with the Wolves. It's a collection, an anthology. It's very good. Yeah, thank you.
Is this your first time here at Soul Food Poetry Night?
Poetry night, yes.
Okay, I thought so. Well, extra applause for first times. I guess you've been at the other open mic nights that aren't necessarily just poetry. Okay, next up we have Jeff Davis, whose favorite time of day is 5 p.m. And is this your first time at Poetry Night? It is. Well, an extra special welcome. Jeff.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking for a particular poem and I'm not finding it. It's called Greener Grasses. What if the grass is greener just beyond that hill? I wonder what it looks like. I wonder how it feels. And then I get there and what I find is indeed the grass is greener this time. I sit down, enjoy its color, its softness, and its smell. Then I look into the distance and I start to wonder, what's the grass like beyond that hill? Rainbow chaser. Susie is a rainbow chaser, which means that every single day she wakes up and gets to work at shooing the clouds away. She'll tell you, gosh, I love my job. Every day is fun. Even though after 10 years chasing, I haven't caught a one. She'll tell you, rainbows are elusive. They're the darndest things to get. The only time that I've come close was when I wasn't chasing it. This is called Meaning. I'm searching for light in the darkest of places, a familiar smile in a sea of strange faces, something of weight inside an empty bag, a fresh scented towel amongst dirty rags, some meaning, some value, something honest and true. I'm just searching for something that's worth holding on to. And problem solving. There's an itch on my back I've been trying to scratch. It's been bothering me for years. It's in a place I can't reach, and it's been such a feat that my efforts have nearly brought me to tears. I grew so tired of this constant dread that I finally got smart and used my head and invented this itching machine. It's simple in design, truly one of a kind, and it scratches an itch like a dream. That's all I got. Thanks, everyone.
please come back. Next, we have Janka Hobbs, whose favorite time of day is dawn, especially when she sleeps through it.
Some of us are short. Just here. Amphibian survey. I kissed a frog prince. I met him in a marsh during an amphibian survey. He was a cute little red-legged guy with delicate olive modeling. When I kissed him, he sat on my hand and said, "Meep." He did not conjure a castle. We did not swim off into the pond in happy amplexus. I have the short fingers of a desert toad and lack the graceful digitation of the true Rene. No aura of silk ball gown clung to my muddy waders. I put the frog down and he swam off. But he did show me where the salamanders attached their eggs and the sticklebacks hid in the reeds. And maybe, just maybe, the developers respected the wetland buffer and the frog prince is still there. FTL. The faster you travel, the slower time moves. An hour spent on an airplane can feel like eternity. A few years in space and everyone you knew is gone. Will faster than light travel make time move backwards? Astronauts arriving far enough before they left could be received as space aliens. Were the pyramids built as beacons for spacecraft we have yet to launch?
Thank you, everyone. Is there anyone else who would like to read before we close up? Thank you to SoulFood for having us. I'd like to close with a poem of mine. It's called Lost. With the death of the young, you mourn potential. With the death of the old, you mourn accomplishment. But this is so only if you are cold and do not mourn simply love. A flower grows in a sidewalk's crack, and fledglings with the smallest wings still flap as they fall from the nest. Mourn everything. Thank you for coming tonight. Hope to see you next month. We have, I'm suddenly going blank on who's our reader, our featured readers next month. I know Todd Marshall, a state poet laureate, is coming in November, and if you go look online for Soul Food Poetry Night, you can see who's coming up next month. And I apologize, I'm suddenly going blank. Thank you again to our featured readers. Hope to see you all back next month. Good night.
singularly for me, and I don't want to hear 2, 3, 4 haikus.
Yeah.
But
Well, fortunately, these aren't.
no, they weren't, and they worked really, really well.
Although they sometimes can feel it.
They don't feel as formal.
Well, I try to give myself a different writing challenge every month, and last month first came around and I had, oh well, okay, August 8, okay, 8 words.
It's a good way. Well, you do a lot of prompts. Like you was going to use that. Yeah. I rarely, I'm supposed to be, I'll do one because that particular one says something to me, which usually I do.
I'm mostly trying to get myself to write different area of French. Like this month, I am avoiding using the word tie.
Oh, yeah.
Which spelling?
I
Well, the Divine Intervention, the first poem I did, every place where the word I was, it was never.
It's something I know from doing lots of readings. There's definitely a difference in
EYE or I as a yes. So, but you
I
can't,
noticed it particularly.
I don't like to say it because it just says it. But when you read it to yourself, you notice that. It's kind of odd.
It's nice to have that for readers.
one of the ones that I won't say hard, it got tricky was last year one month I wrote verbalist poems. So I read about that. I thought, okay, that'd be interesting to try.
ever had the magnetic. I really enjoyed it. And so they've got, people walking by and people just make up. So, yeah. So I'll read some of them. It's kind of fun. But yeah, I used to have them all over the place. People came to me as gifts. Well, gotta do it. New things all the time.
Before I moved into the place, before I moved into the place I'm at now, I stayed at a friend's condo briefly. There was just inside the kitchen, there was a panel with I think that one or two
Well,
cents.
when you started talking about her being at the bottom of the sea and the fisherman, and I was like, oh, I know what he's going to look into. But the whole thing with her chasing it down,